Thank you very much. That was a great talk, seeing what you can do when you work with these kind of really well-described collections and the opportunities of what you can do with that. So the next talk we have is from Richard Nevell from Wikimedia UK, and he'll be talking about leveraging AI and crowdsourced data.
Good afternoon, everyone. Right, so ideally this would have been a double act presentation, but Jason Evans isn't able to join me today as he's at another conference, which is a bit of a shame as he's done a lot more work with the AI in this particular project than I have. So I just thought I'd put it out there so I get my excuses in early, especially if you have any difficult questions. But it's also important to mention his work as this involved the National Library of Wales, and it probably wouldn't have been possible without a lot of their input in this. So this is all about a project called Our Heritage, Our Stories. It was part of the Towards a National Collection set of projects, and that was all funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council. The idea was to create a way of bringing together the collections across the country. I mean, it really is what it says. It's trying to build a national collection. And there are also different experimental projects working on those, employing different methods, working with different kinds of heritage data. This particular project was working with community-generated digital content. So that's stuff which is developed by museums, community groups, can be born digital, or can be stuff that has been digitized. So we're dealing with stuff that can be old photographs that have been scanned, or stuff that's been created for the digital age as a specific digital object. So it's dealing with lots of different kinds of material, and that is one of the challenges of the project, but also one of the most important aspects, because dealing with the richness of the heritage that we want to be sharing. It is, or rather was, since it has now concluded, a multi-year project spanning about 3.5 years and involved a lot of different organisations. The core partners were the universities of Glasgow and Manchester and the National Archives. They provided a lot of the infrastructure and a lot of the staff time going into this project. And then their collaborating partners, they were feeding into the various models and the approaches involved in directing the project and providing data as well. I would like to draw your attention to 2 of the last 3 in particular. So I'm from Wikimedia UK, and we were providing insight into the use of Wikidata and Wikibase as a tool for this project. And the National Library of Wales, which is Jason's institute, and provided a lot of the data that was being used for testing the tools. So what happened is that during this project, the team decided it would be useful to have an AI pipeline to process the large amounts of data that were coming through. The thing was that the data being provided by these community groups wasn't standardized, and though there was metadata, it was also in a variety of formats. So everything from JSON and CSV to stuff that was still in JPEGs. So it presented quite a few challenges as a result. But the important thing is that the underlying data was largely text-based, which was rather handy. So the plan with the AI pipeline was to start turning this metadata into something a bit more connected, to apply named entity recognition. So that's where you're drawing out, or rather you're identifying people, places, dates, and things. Those can be concepts or events. The idea is that can be used to create linked open data. So you are creating relationships between, say, people and places and dates as well, turning stuff that was sitting perhaps in an Excel file into stuff that can be queried at scale, and importantly, can link to other parts of other collections as well. The code used to create the AI pipeline is available on GitHub, so you are very welcome to experiment with it. It comes with a health warning, though, because if you are not especially tech-savvy, this is the raw output. I'll give you a couple of minutes to read that from top to bottom. So what we have here is an output which contains those named entities within there, but it's not especially user-friendly. You need some kind of front end to be working with that. And so that is where Wikibase comes in. If you're familiar with Wikidata, it works on the same principle. It actually works on the same software, but it allows you to more tightly define what data you're working with. So Wikidata is an open source database, even a knowledge graph, which contains more than 100 million things. I'm deliberately vague about that because it's a lot of stuff, from publications to places, events, and abstract ideas. It can be a very useful authority control. So that's where you are looking for something to say, okay, I can be sure that this particular John Smith is this person who was alive between these dates. And if I'm connecting it to this authority control, it connects to all these other things as well. With a Wikibase instance, you're able to select particular parts of the data, and you're able to create kind of a walled garden and control who can access it, or rather, more importantly, who can edit it. So the great strength of Wikidata is that it is editable in the same way that Wikidata is, but you may want to have some controls over who can change things, and you may want some particular fields of information added to your data set. So that's why a Wikibase instance was set up for the project. Here we have a schematic diagram of some information. What we've got here is a central point, Barry Docs 1901. This is a representation for one of the items in the collections we're working with. And you can see here that it's telling us what collection it's a part of, some IDs, so it's got an ID for OHOS, so that's the Our Heritage, Our Stories project. And then it's got the date as well. So it's finding ways to structure this information. And you could also imagine a scenario where you get links off from these dots to other things as well. In fact, this is a representation of two collections. One cluster is the People's Collection of Wales, and the other cluster is Cardiff Special Collections and their diary collection. Now, as far as knowledge graphs go, that is extremely dense. But what's really interesting is where they intersect. So that bit in the middle. And you can start to see some of those things which are the points of intersection between these two data sets. And that's very often where the extra value is from collections beginning to talk to each other. It is unfortunately still rather dense, but it's highlighting people and places which were shared between those collections. And it's a really good discovery tool because the collections, the people involved with them, might not have been aware of these points of intersection. Now, this AI pipeline has been quite effective, but there were a number of challenges along the way, not least of which is that with named entity recognition, you do get some false positives. So I gave the example of John Smith earlier, and that's kind of the biggest challenge. How do you identify people within that who may have similar names? The models we were using had quite a high error rate. This project started in 2022 and ran till early 24. And in that time, ChatGPT was released. And a bit of experimentation towards the end of the project found that that was actually really quite effective at dealing with the data. So it's not a full part of the pipeline, but we did find that more recent language models were rather effective. It's also worth noting that a lot of this content was available not just in English. So the good thing about working with Welsh collections is it was working with Welsh language. And so there were challenges of working with that. And we found that the models were not as good at dealing with Welsh as with English, which is perhaps not surprising because there's less training data, but it's also important to remember because a lot of this information could end up getting kind of compressed into English by default. And that is not fully representative of the heritage. So the final point is that the Our Heritage, Our Stories project has a website where you can explore the information. Because it is this linked open data and it's structured, you can search across collections. You might just about be able to make out the map on the left-hand side and see that the cluster is skewed towards Wales. There's a very straightforward reason for that. A lot of the initial data that was put in was from the People's Collections of Wales and the National Library of Wales. It really helped that the National Library had done a lot of work supporting these projects over the years, and so there was really good metadata to begin with. And it was the nuances of the language and different types of content that helped with the adaptation of the AI pipeline. You can also explore via a timeline, so see how many different objects were created at different points in time, and you can look at different tags for the content as well, so relating to usually people and places. So it gives you ways of exploring across collections in ways which are quite intuitive. So it's a really good resource. It is definitely worth a poke around. In terms of some of the issues with it, we found that if this had been a project which started in 2023 or 4, it would have been very different in how it was going about it. With the high rate of false positives around named entity recognition, there was still quite an amount of human involvement in terms of ensuring data quality. And that is a challenge when it comes to creating linked open data from collections. We're dealing with tens, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of objects. So the appeal of an AI pipeline is that it can work at those kinds of scales, in which a way in which human time just would struggle to keep up, or at least over a reasonable time frame. So it's a great example of universities and cultural institutions working together and creating linked open data. And it's definitely worth exploring. And the website will be available for several years. The lead institutions are currently thinking about what the next steps might be, because there has been so much useful stuff coming out of this. I also like how it kind of links back to the theme of the knowledge graph before. And at that point, I will conclude my talk there. Thank you very much for listening.